We're now a couple days into the offseason, and things are officially starting to happen. The Orioles declining the option on Eloy Jimenez, signing a couple of pitchers to minor league deals, and they have some other big decisions coming up today. And we'll get to it all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Monday, November 4th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to take a look at some of the more minor moves that the Orioles have made over the weekend, declining the option on Eloy Jimenez for 2025, making him a free agent. We'll talk about the two intriguing arms the Orioles have brought in over the weekend on minor league deals, and then take a look forward. The Orioles have some big decisions to make here on Monday, and what decisions they could make there with the options and the qualifying offers. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So we'll kick this one off with the Orioles having to make these option decisions. We are currently still in the 5-day period that begins after the World Series ends, which it did on Wednesday night with the Dodgers defeating the Yankees in 5 games. And there are 5 days where you can exclusively negotiate with your own free agents. They can't talk with any other teams. And also, it is the deadline in those 5 days to get your option decisions done and to hand out any qualifying offers as well. And back on Friday's episode, we talked about, what decisions the Orioles have to make. And as of the time I'm recording this, they've only really made one of those decisions. Now, here is the big disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It is just after 4:30 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday as I'm sitting down to record. Unfortunately, this was just the time on Sunday I had to record this episode. There is a chance that by the time you are hearing this or watching this on Monday morning, the Orioles have made some more of these decisions that we are going to chat about because they are due about 24 hours from when I'm recording. They're due on 5 p.m. Eastern time on Monday evening. But for now, they've made one of these decisions, and it was, I would say, the most straightforward of all of the decisions. And that is that the Orioles have declined the 2025 club option on Eloy Jimenez. Now, Jimenez, who, when he came up years ago with the White Sox, set the world on fire as one of the best rookies in baseball in 2019. And he was such a top prospect with the White Sox. I mean, he was a top 5 prospect in all of baseball for a while there, that the White Sox gave him a contract that you'll see from time to time where he got a contract extension before he even played a game in the majors with Chicago. They ended up, while he was still in AAA, shortly before coming up, they gave him a 6-year extension in 2019 before his debut. So that ran from 2019 through 2024, but they also tacked some team options onto the end of it. They tacked on a $16.5 million team option for 2025 and an $18 million team option for 2026 because the White Sox thought, hey, if Eloy Jimenez is going to be as good as we think, getting him for $16 and $18 million 7 and 8 years from now is going to be super cheap, and this is going to help us out. Unfortunately for Chicago and for Eloy, it went the other direction. He struggled. He has had all the injuries that we've known over the past couple of years. And it came to the point where he didn't have a whole lot of trade value. The White Sox dealt him to the Orioles at the deadline this year. Trey McGuff was the left-handed pitcher in AAA who went to the White Sox in the deal. And Eloy came over and was pretty good in the month of August, helped the Orioles offense as a DH. I mean, he's just so injured. He can't really play the field at this point. He certainly can't really run at all. But he gave them a little bit of a spark. He was still hitting the ball hard, but having the issues where he was just beating everything into the ground. The Orioles helped him to raise his average launch angle. He was hitting the ball in the air more, still hitting it hard. Things were looking good in August. And then in September, he had one hit. It didn't go well, and the Orioles actually optioned him to AAA in the final week of the season. They knew this team option was here. They knew it was $16.5 million. There was pretty much nothing Eloy Jimenez could have done in his 2 months in an Oriole uniform that would have warranted the Orioles to pick up this $16.5 million option and bring him back. Now, the O's have declined it, so he will become a free agent officially. It doesn't mean Jimenez wouldn't be back next year with the Orioles. If they feel like they would need some sort of right-handed DH option, and they could bring him back on a cheaper, 1 year, $6-7 million deal to get him back in Baltimore, it's possible. But just the way that the Orioles team is constructed right now in their lineup, and with the fact that Jimenez is still so limited, like, yes, he is going to get healthier this offseason. He was still playing hurt at the end of the year with his lower body injuries. So he'll be able to run a little bit better and move a little bit better, you would think, heading into next year. But I don't think to the point where you would want to play him in the outfield more than, 5 times in the year. Like, he's still basically a DH who is still trying to get back to the offensive production he once had. He is a guy who feels much more fit on a team that is rebuilding. And he's not going back to the White Sox, but another team that has an opening for a right-handed hitting DH to try and rebuild his value on like a 1-year prove-it contract. I think someone will give Jimenez a major league deal. Again, $5, $6, $7, $8 million to prove his worth. I think the only way he'd be back in Baltimore if he doesn't even find that, and he's willing to take a minor league deal with a big league camp invite with the Orioles to try and win a spot in spring training. Otherwise, he's probably going to sign elsewhere, get healthy, try to hit on a bad team on a 1-year deal, get traded at the deadline, and then try and sign an actual deal next offseason as a free agent. Because it's not like he's old. He's just, he looks like he is when he's playing out there because he's just so injured. I mean, it was an 82 WRC plus with the White Sox before the trade. And despite a good August, bad September, it was a 69 WRC plus with the Orioles in the 2 months after the trade. And there's just a lot to be done with Eloy Jimenez at this point. I think there's still some Major League Baseball ahead of him in his career. It's just probably not going to be with the Orioles. With this option being $16.5 million, even with David Rubenstein at the helm, you're not paying that to a player that's just not producing and is super injured right now. But it was really cool that he came over to Baltimore. The quotes he gave, how he felt like it reinvigorated him. He was having fun playing baseball again after that trade. I absolutely wish Eloy Jimenez the best. Hopefully he does find a home on a major league deal, and hopefully he can get healthy, rebuild that value, and get himself another at least solid contract maybe next offseason. And with this trade, Trey McGuff, he threw some good innings in AAA, and he'll probably honestly pitch for the White Sox, the big league level next year. Some of that has to do with the fact that he'll be on the worst team in baseball, but I don't regret this trade at all, even though Jimenez didn't produce too much. Like, it's a guy who's got a high upside, who's still hitting the ball hard. You basically give up nothing. You take the risk. I do that kind of risk all the time. And this is how, again, even if he did produce, this is how it was always going to end, with him getting that option declined by the Orioles and becoming a free agent. But the O's did make it official by declining his club option over the weekend, and Jimenez will become a free agent. So they let Eloy Jimenez walk, but they did bring in 2 new faces over the weekend, a couple of guys on minor league deals who maybe could have a shot to make this team out of spring training. We'll tell you a little bit about Yaramil Hiraldo and Rodolfo Martinez, both added to the Orioles roster on minor league deals. That is coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that is at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And today's episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by the DK Law Group. When you need a law firm, do you want the legal runaround, or would you rather have a no-nonsense approach? Well, you get the latter with the DK Law Group. The DK Law Group specializes in real estate law, estate planning, business law, and family law. They're tech savvy, they treat their clients like family, and they focus on keeping your legal solutions simple. And the DK Law Group is a women-led firm with Diana Kahn at the helm. And one of the things you'll quickly notice with the DK Law Group is their transparent pricing. They believe in clarity in cost. So contact the DK Law Group today at dklawmd.com. And Locked On Orioles listeners can call today to schedule a free 30-minute consultation when you mention the tagline, Empowering Legacies. So the Eloy Jimenez decision was the one made so far, at least again, as I record this, close to 5 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. But the Orioles also brought in a couple of players last week on minor league deals and wanted to discuss the two of them briefly. Two right-handed pitchers, minor league deals for the Orioles. I don't think it's been reported yet. We'll see if either of them are getting big league spring training invites. The fact that they're 28 and 30 years old tells me there's at least a good chance we'll see them in big league camp in Sarasota. But wanted to talk about the two of them as the Orioles, like every team, they're going to do this every offseason, right? They're going to take these flyers on these guys on minor league deals to see if they can pop, especially on relievers who have a trait or two that they like. So the first one is 28-year-old right-hander Yaramil Hiraldo, who last pitched in affiliated minor league baseball in 2021 in high A with the Arizona Diamondbacks. That's a while ago to be pitching in high A when he had a 4.13 ERA in 24 innings that year. He had signed with the D-backs out of the Dominican Republic as an international free agent, and he had debuted as a professional in rookie ball in 2018. Then he left affiliated ball after 2021 and started to pitch in independent ball in the U.S. Pitched in the Atlantic League, which is pretty much widely known as the best independent league in the U.S. in 2022 and 2023. He had a 4.75 ERA in 72 innings over those two seasons, but struck out more than 12 batters per nine across that time and was flashing good strikeout stuff. And that led him to the Mexican League in 2024, which there's arguments about which of those leagues is better. A lot of people equate the Mexican League to AAA. The Atlantic League is maybe AA or AAA. Some would argue the Mexican League is better and that he stepped up. So he moved to the Mexican League in 2024 and had a 2.05 ERA this season in 22 innings, allowed just 9 hits with 27 strikeouts to 8 walks. He was a lockdown reliever in the Mexican League this year. There was a write-up on him from Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs in 2021 when he was a prospect in the D-back system, had a fastball 91 to 94, top 95 with a good changeup. He also has a slider in his repertoire now as well. And that's kind of still where his fastball has been sitting. He is pitching in the Dominican Winter League in Lidom this winter. Saw a little bit of video where he was basically throwing fastballs at 93. So generally that's where his four-seamer is still sitting. And it looks like he still has the changeup and the slider to go with it as a reliever. Again, in affiliated ball, not a guy who's pitched above high A. So there's a good chance he would maybe even start the year in Bowie for the Orioles, not even go to Norfolk. But again, there's definitely some stuff they like. It's kind of a herky-jerky delivery with some deception there. So I'm sure the Orioles like that and want to work with that. But again, these are these flyers that they bring in and see if they can tweak something to turn them into a big league reliever. And the other guy the Orioles brought in, which this guy to me a little more intriguing, is 30-year-old right-handed pitcher Rodolfo Martinez. Now, it's been even longer for Martinez since he has pitched in affiliated minor league baseball. It was all the way back in 2019 in the San Francisco Giants system that he last pitched. He actually moved up the ranks in 2019, pitched in high A, double A, and triple A for the Giants affiliates that year. That was his debut in triple A right at the end of that 2019 season. So he had to feel good. Hey, I got to triple A at the end of the year. It's only got to be up from here. Well, of course, the next year, 2020, there was no minor league season, and Martinez was not brought back to the Giants, where they signed him out of the Dominican Republic as a teenager back in 2013. He had 52 strikeouts in 47 innings with a 4.56 ERA that final year in the Giants system. And if you read some of the Fangraphs write-ups, he was up to 100 and had touched 102 miles an hour with his fastball back then, and was a somewhat notable, like at some points was in the Giants top 30 prospect lists back in the 2017, 18, and 19 times when he was moving up their system. But since then, as far as I can tell, he has not played like during the spring, summer, and fall in any professional baseball now until 2024. Now, he had been playing in the Dominican Winter League every year, and there are some players that just do that. Like that is their main league. They play in Lidom every winter in the Dominican Republic. That's where he grew up. And he was, a pretty solid reliever in the DR in that league, but either wasn't getting the chances to play the full season ball or didn't want to. But he returned to full season baseball in 2024. Now, it was not affiliated, but it was just like Hiraldo. He pitched in the Mexican League in 2024 for the first time in his career. And he wasn't great. He was a 5.79 ERA in 19 innings, but he was hitting 101 still with that fastball in the Mexican League this year. Now, he is 30 years old. And again, it's been since 2019 that he pitched an affiliated ball, but Mexican League can be somewhat close to AAA. He's hitting 101. If you got a chance to bring him in, go for it. Now, I would say while Hiraldo might start in AA, I would think Martinez probably begins the year in the Norfolk Tides bullpen in AAA. You get him throwing 100, and you basically see what you can do with the secondary stuff, and you go from there. And again, the Orioles are going to make more signings like this throughout the offseason, where you're bringing these guys you may have never heard of. I mean, these are some really off-the-radar guys because they haven't pitched an affiliated ball in 3, 4, 5 years. You're going to see some other guys where it was like, oh, they were in so-and-so system in AAA last year, got released, and now the Orioles have brought them in on a minor league deal to put them in AAA and see if they can pop and turn into a big leaguer. You're going to see a lot of minor league contracts, even with an Orioles team with David Rubenstein, where they should absolutely be expanding the big league payroll and spending on some free agents this offseason. I think they're going to do that. That doesn't mean you stop signing minor league free agents, because minor league free agents is A, how you fill out some of your rosters in the minor leagues, and B, how you hit on guys. You know, out of every 10 minor league signings, maybe you only hit on one, but that one becomes a super cheap addition to help your major league team. Every single ball club does it. I don't understand when people get upset at minor league signings. They were the lowest risk thing possible with sometimes high reward that you can do transactionally in Major League Baseball. And they never take away playing time from any of your important big leaguers, any of your important prospects in the minor leagues. Like, that's just not how it works. It's no risk, and there's not a lot of reward sometimes, but sometimes there is. You know who came in on a minor league deal? Albert Suarez. And we saw how that worked out last year. I'm not saying that Hiraldo or Martinez are going to be 2025 Albert Suarez. That would be unbelievable if that was the case. But you got to keep trying to find those guys on these cheap deals, and the Orioles continue to do that with these two veteran right-handers. But there should be plenty more news coming out of the Orioles later today, as the deadline to get these options in, to get these qualifying offers in, is at 5 p.m. So coming up next, wanted to talk about what the decisions are that the Orioles have left, and wanted to talk about some other free agents, because some other option decisions by other teams have already been made this weekend. It made for a further list of intriguing free agents this offseason. I want to chat about some of them and their fits in Baltimore to finish off the pod coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Game Time. Now, listen, Game Time is the place to get all your tickets. It's not just baseball. Baseball season's over. It's not just sports. It's everything. Game Time, they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And again, it's not just baseball. It's not just sports. Like, yeah, you can find basketball and football and hockey tickets on Game Time right now, but also Game Time Picks, their curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And if you turn on their all-in pricing, it makes it just the best app to use, because you toggle this feature on, it shows the total upfront. You don't get any surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So to finish things off on today's Monday episode, wanted to talk a little bit about some other guys who have become free agents this weekend. As I mentioned, we're kind of in that 5-day window where teams can only exclusively negotiate with their own free agents. We generally don't see a lot of extensions in that time, but we actually saw one on Sunday. Michael Wacha signed a new 3-year contract extension with the Kansas City Royals on Sunday. Wacha is a right-handed pitcher I've been banging the table over the past 2, maybe 3 off seasons for the Orioles to bring in. He's been signing a 1-year deal with a new team each year. Well, he was really good with the Royals this year, and they just said, you know what? We're not letting him walk. We are locking him up. Man, would Wacha be a great fit on the back end of the Orioles rotation, but he's going to be a Kansas City Royal for a little while now, and that's unfortunate. But sometimes you do see that. I don't imagine we'll see that with Santander or James McCann or Corbin Burns or anyone like that during this stretch, but it does happen. But what always happens during this stretch is because the deadline, again, is here Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern time to get all those option decisions done. And so we've seen a good amount of those option decisions made. And a lot of times it's teams picking up their options or players picking up their player options to stay with their team. But also there's options that get declined and guys become free agents. Now, some of these names, we figured these options would be declined, but still it's interesting to take a look at them. Like the first one is Blake Snell, who opted out of his contract. And Snell, after the fiasco that was his free agency last offseason, saw him sign with the Giants, struggle with injury, struggle early, then come out and basically be the best starting pitcher in baseball in the second half. We saw him dominate the Orioles in that start at Camden Yards in September more than I've ever seen another pitcher dominate anyone. Well, he's a free agent again. And man, oh man, would Blake Snell look good in an Oriole uniform next year. Now, he's going to be looking for a bigger contract, one that he did not get last offseason. So it's going to be something the Orioles are going to have to be considering. But if Corbin Burns is not back in Baltimore, Blake Snell could be that guy. Sean Manaea opted out. That seemed to be what was going to happen. He had a great year with the Mets, so he opted out of his deal. Now, the Mets are going to try to just bring him back for more money, but maybe he can find a better deal in Baltimore. Great left-handed pitcher who changed his arm angle and his approach this year and basically made him completely nasty halfway through the season. Now, Manaea has been good in the past, was good in Oakland A. He threw a no-hitter one time in Oakland. Like, he's had a good career, but it kind of revitalized him when he made that arm angle change this year. He's someone I am really intrigued with that I would love to see the Orioles go get because he will not cost the price of what a Blake Snell would, but could still really help you as like a number 2 or 3 in their rotation. I would love to see Sean Manaea. Then there's a guy like Nick Martinez, who's been kind of a starter reliever hybrid with a couple of different teams, Padres, and then this year with the Cincinnati Reds. He seemed like he was a trade candidate at the deadline, but the Reds decided not to move him. Now he opts out. Martinez is just a good guy to have around because he's not like the most dominant pitcher, but he's good as a starter and he's good as a reliever, and he's okay with being flopped back and forth between that role throughout the season. So he can start the year as your 5th starter, then can be moved to the bullpen if you need to, and then can come back to the rotation if there's injuries, and he still will pitch well in both roles. The veteran guy has got a good changeup. Again, he's not the highest ceiling guy. He might end up just being your number 5 starter if you sign him as a starting pitcher, but you know he can move into the bullpen and pitch well. You know he can be versatile. He can be a swing man out of the pen. He can be a 1-inning guy. Nick Martinez, I don't know. He's a versatile, like Swiss Army knife pitcher that I think the Orioles should take a look at. Then there's David Robertson. Just, he's basically 40 now, and he's still getting guys out as a setup man. I think it would be a nice veteran addition to the Oriole bullpen. And then Joc Pederson. Joc Pederson, who was kind of falling off the radar a little bit, but he had a really good year with the Diamondbacks this year and declined his option so he could become a free agent and make some more money because he hit the ball so well. Now, you're basically not going to play him against lefties. He's mostly a platoon guy, but he's a left-handed hitter, so he's the heavy side of the platoon where he plays against righties. And again, you see way more right-handed pitchers than you do lefties, so that gives him a lot more playing time. And you can argue, Connor, well, what does Joc Pederson do that Heston Kjerstad doesn't or that Anthony Santander doesn't? And I get that. But if Santander's not back and you're still not convinced on Heston Kjerstad, or if Santander's not back and you also use Kjerstad to go get a pitcher in a trade, Joc Pederson could be a perfect fill to play some innings in right field and DH for you. That is certainly something that could happen. But those are just some names that are out there that I thought it's kind of intriguing that those guys, we didn't know what exactly was going to happen. Now we know they have, had their options declined or opted out. And now we do know that they are going to become free agents. So again, as I'm recording, is right on the dot right now, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday. As of now, declining Eloy Jimenez's option is the only move the Orioles have made. So from my recording, the Orioles have exactly 24 hours to make the rest of their decisions. From the time you're listening to this, they've got a few less hours. But 5 p.m. Eastern time on Monday is the deadline for these option decisions. They're all club options. The Orioles are making the decisions. Ryan O'Hearn for $8 million. I think the O's should pick it up. I guess there's a chance he would be maybe traded if the O's want to, move a different direction, whatever it may be. But it would just be dumb to decline the option. At least pick it up. And if you're not planning on him being a big role next year. Try to find a way to trade him and get something for him. Seranthony Dominguez, the same thing. Like, yeah, there's questions about him. He has an $8 million option, but he pitched well enough down the stretch that he's a helpful reliever. And again, if you want to try and trade him, I guess you can, but might as well try to get something for him. Danny Coulomb at $4 million. That is a no-brainer. They're absolutely going to pick that one up. And then Cionel Perez is a $2.2 million option, but his is a little different. If the Orioles decline his, he will still be under contract. He'll just go to arbitration, and they'll have to figure out a number that he'll make next year. But I do think they'll just pick up the $2.2 million because I think his ARB number would be probably fairly close to that. Anyway, and then the qualifying offer decisions. We've talked about the qualifying offer already. It is a 1-year, $21 million contract that you can offer out to players that are hitting free agency. If they do say yes to it, that's great. You get them back for 1 extra year. If they say no to it and they sign with another team, you get draft pick compensation. For the Orioles, it would be a pick in between the first and second rounds. The Orioles are expected to offer the qualifying offer to both Corbin Burnes and Anthony Santander, but that deadline is 5 p.m. today on Monday to make those decisions official. Like Corbin Burnes, of course, they're going to offer it to him. I guess there's a little bit of a question whether they'll offer it to Santander, but they should. And I think they'll offer it to both. And again, I think they'll pick up the options on those remaining 4 players that I mentioned. But you never know. They could make an intriguing, interesting decision on one of these guys. And either way, I'll be back with you tomorrow to have it all covered. On Tuesday's episode, we'll break down all the decisions the Orioles make on these options, on these qualifying offers. And then we'll talk about kind of where they go from there, because when we are back tomorrow, it is the official opening of all free agency. That 5-day window is going to be over. Everything's up for grabs. Guys can be signed, traded, whatever. It's really going to truly open up this offseason, and we'll get to that on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.